Hey guys, let's talk about books. Welcome back to my 5 Reads series where we talk about, you listen, to 5 books that I have recently read, starting this time with Heaven on Earth by Emma J. Wells. The full title here is Heaven on Earth, The Lives and Legacies of the World's Greatest Cathedrals. The call number is 426.609, which I'm guessing is cathedrals. Comes under the history, geographic treatment and biography of cathedrals. What a shock. I talked about this a little bit in a reading vlog. I think it was my April one. I'll link that if you're interested. This is about 16 cathedrals across Europe, and it explores for each one the reason that the cathedral was built, the people who caused the funding to be generated to build a cathedral or to take a building and re-engineer it into a cathedral, extend and renovate, that sort of thing. So it's about the people behind the cathedral. It's about the building itself and some iconic features of the cathedral, about the impact of it, the impact of the innovation of that particular cathedral on cathedral building, the engineering and the art of it. I found in some places it got right into the intricacies of the shape of the window or the shape of the buttress or, architecture things that didn't particularly interest me, although the book is about the architecture of cathedrals, so that's going to happen. But I think if you were into architecture in particular, it probably doesn't go deep enough, and you might be bored by the history surrounding cathedrals. Overall, it was a pretty dry read. I'm not going to lie. It was interesting. I definitely have an itinerary of places to visit in Europe, but I didn't find the history of the people compelling, and I didn't find the discussion about the architecture compelling. I'm glad to have read it, but there are some images in here, colour photographs in colour insert pages. Let me find one like that, but it's quite sparse. There's not many of those. There's one for each, at least one for each cathedral discussed. But I definitely was on Google a lot looking for images so I could get a picture in my head of what the book was talking about, because I've never been to any of these places. And I think if you have been to them, if you're familiar with these cathedrals, or if you're planning to visit them, this would be interesting. Like I said, it is an itinerary for my European adventures, when I'm a millionaire. And like I said, I'm glad to have read it, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend or even reread it. It is a pretty book though, isn't it? That's basically why I bought it. Of course, because I always forget to say something about a book. This one was published in 2022. Next up is another one I talked about in a reading vlog, and that is probably the same one actually as Heaven on Earth. The Menopause Manifesto, Own Your Health with Facts and Feminism by Dr. Jen Gunter. This was published in 2021, and the call number is 618.175, which is menopause. This, if you are somebody who is going to experience the menopause in your lifetime, if you make it that far, then this is a great book, and I do recommend it. It's very North American centric in discussions of accessing healthcare and medicine in particular. Not medicine, medicines, drugs, interventions. But overall, it is a book about what is going to happen to your body. Why is this happening to your body? Why are the symptoms of menopause, what could be causing them? And basically giving you the information so that you can take that to, in Australia, it would be your GP to begin with, take that to your doctor and say, this is happening, stop gaslighting me and give me help. And as someone who has experienced medical gaslighting regarding my reproductive system on more than one issue, I needed this. I really did. Basically, like I said, takes what is happening to you, writes it down, but also tackles myths around menopause that you may have picked up from the internet or from elders around you that are incorrect or miss the mark a little bit. It didn't reassure me in the way that I wanted to be reassured. I wanted my hand held and to be told everything was going to be okay. and it might not be okay. And that's the nature of menopause, and you just don't know which symptoms are going to attack you, which symptoms are going to miss you entirely. And I have an older woman that I'm close to who is struggling through this time, and that's why I got the fear. And one of the things tackled in the book is the thing that she is struggling with. And it was very straightforwardly put out, this is what is happening, this is why it is happening, here are some things that you can try, here are some things to say to your doctor. It did dispel my fear around, not that I had a fear, but there was a fear in the early 2000s or late 90s. I remember it all over TV about hormonal, what do they call it? HRT, which is not called HRT anymore. Menopausal hormone therapy now. Something like that. And the fear of breast cancer in particular. And it broke down how these findings came about, the part where it's not particularly replicable, the groups that are particularly at risk of that. That reassured me that if that's going to be the most optimal treatment plan for me, to not be afraid of it. I guess I got out of the book what the book was trying to give me, which was the facts and the empowerment to go to a medical professional and say, this is happening to me and I need help. And to know that the things that might be, the symptoms that I might be experiencing are menopause related and not me going crazy or diving into depression and anxiety. And it's hard to tell. It's hard to tell until you're at the other side exactly what it was that was affecting your brain. In my experience, if you are somebody who may experience menopause, definitely recommend even having a look at this one, because like with everything, there's 1,000 books on the market, and I've seen so many come up in my recommends after buying this one that are new release books about menopause as well. So if Dr. Gunter doesn't vibe with you, there will be a book out there, and definitely worth investigating even just the broad strokes rather than let the fear wash over you. You can be afraid and know what to be afraid of. I think that's where I stand now. And to be honest, that's just my general experience with anxiety in my life anyway. So I'm cool with this position. And now for something completely different. St. Peter's Fair by Ellis Peters. This is a Brother Cadfael book. I think this is number 4. Yep, number 4 in the Cadfael Chronicles. This one was published in 1981. This one is, again, we're with Brother Cadfael. He's a monk in the monastery at Shrewsbury. I think this is set in 1139, it says literally on the first page. The monastery where Cadfael lives is holding a fair. It's a massive gathering of merchants, and so it's ripe for a murder scene, isn't it? There's a bit of a conflict between the monastery and the town over who collects the taxes from the fair. There's a bit of argy-bargy between merchants, obviously. There's a damsel in distress, but, you know, she's strong and empowered and she can make her own decisions. There's a love interest. There's multiple love interests for her. And then there's Brother Cadfael, who gets swept up in the events and then has to investigate the murder, which he does successfully, and brings the culprit to justice and puts the love interest and the girl together, and they swan off into the sunset. All these stories are the same, and they're so cozy and lovely, and you know that I love them, and I will be rereading more Brother Cadfael. They're so good. They're definitely chocolate bars for my brain, and I'm not sorry. The Virgin Suicides by Jeffrey Eugenides. This was published in 1993, and I've got the 25th anniversary edition. I wanted this cover in particular. I like the 5 broken roses. I like that they're shiny on the cover. I like the texture. Feels like thick paper rather than a cardboard, and this is probably my favorite part of this book. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm glad to have read it. I read this and then I watched the movie with my daughter, who is in her late teens, and she kind of just let it wash over her. She didn't really get it. And that was interesting to me because when I was her age, or actually a little older, the movie probably came out when I was 19. I just really enjoyed it. It was just gothic vibes, and apparently that's a thing that I really enjoy and didn't realize it had a label. The Virgin Suicides is a book from the perspective of boys who were teenagers in the 50s, and one of them lives opposite this house of 5 girls, the Lisbons, and the novel starts out with one of the daughters committing suicide, attempting suicide, and then later is successful, and over the course of the novel all the sisters eventually die. And it is the book not of them, but of the boys trying to understand these girls, trying to get a handle on who they are and understand why they killed themselves. But they're naive teenage boys, and so they never can fully understand what it's like to be a teenage girl, and they never lose their fascination with what happened with these girls. Now, if this was 2024 that these girls all committed suicide, it would be a true crime podcast. It would not be this book. And also because it's from the point of view of the boys who were peripheral to these events, watching but not being part of these events. You don't ever get to know the sisters well because you're having a second or third hand explanation or characterization of who they are. So it's all very shrouded in mist. The glimpses that you see of the girls and their motivations, their parents, the way they behave at school. It's like gauze covered descriptions. Does that make sense? It's all very, it's not vague, but it's not concrete. And of course, the suicide of all these girls affects the boys and their innocence in their teenage years, and then affects them throughout their lives as well. I can understand why it was award-winning and praised at the time. I feel like now I'm, again, glad to have read it, but I don't think it will stick with me as much as I thought it would in the way that the movie stuck with me. Even though, like most movie adaptations of books, the book is better because you have the explanation and the interiority of the characters rather than skipping over parts to make the story fit into a visual media. Ultimately, nothing's explained because the boys can't explain what happened to the girls. They can't explain how it affected them. They can only demonstrate how it affected them. And so it's all vibes, ultimately. And there's nothing wrong. There's nothing wrong with a book that's mainly vibes if you're into the vibes. Because I have some books here that are vibes and no plot, and I was really looking for a story. So this one, it was fine. It was good. Definitely, if you've been interested in reading it, give it a go. But like I said, I don't think it's going to be one that impacts me. Now, if I was 19 and obsessed, like I was when I was 19, I had the energy for obsession with things, then maybe we will be having a completely different conversation here. And finally is a book that I said I wasn't going to read, and then my book club picked it for a monthly book pick, and I still wasn't going to read it. And then I saw all the discussions surrounding the book and I thought, I might as well give it a go. And that is Barrayar by Lois McMaster Bujold. In North America, this was published as a bind up of the first book of the Vorkosigan saga, which is called Shards of Honor, and I read that last year, I think. And then this one, which is technically book 7 in the series, but it's the second in chronological order of the saga, and it's called Barrayar, and they were published together in a bind-up called Cordelia's Honor, which is the book that was picked for the book club. So I had already read Shards of Honor. I will link my review, but basically it was perfectly fine. Lois McMaster Bujold, it was her first published work, and the rape apology just made me so mad. So mad. It's still making me mad. I hate it. So this follow-up, which picks up pretty much from where Shards of Honor leaves off, have the main character, Cordelia. She basically speed ran a romance with this guy from a different planet called Aral Vorkosigan. And by the end of the book, she has left her life, her family, her planet, her culture to go and live essentially with the enemy because she's fallen in love. And at the start of this book, they're married and Cordelia is pregnant with their first child. As the book goes on, it discusses the culture shock that Cordelia has on this other planet, in this other culture, It discusses the demands of power and influence. Barrayar, the planet that she's come to, is a very feudal-based society. And so there are, the great houses with the great men who become the ruling class, the military class. Cordelia's husband, Errol, has become regent of the planet after the king dies, and the new king is too young to rule. I think he's 4 or around about that. And becoming regent puts him in political danger and, of course, actual danger. There's some assassination attempts, and eventually an attempt made on Errol's life endangers the life of the unborn child, which was stuff that was hard for me to read, having had a couple of pregnancies and not getting a child out of the end of one of them, but written in a way that is sympathetic and empathetic. Definitely empathetic to being pregnant, and being pregnant in a place where you're not supported, but your baby is. The baby is the important thing. Feels. It's not it is spoilers, but not spoilers to say that the baby survives but is severely disabled, because that is the main point of the rest of the series. The baby is the focal character of the rest of the series, Miles Wilcox again, and is a well-known character in sci-fi having a disability. Now, I haven't read them, and I probably won't read them, but my impression is that it is a nuanced view of being disabled in an abled world. Don't quote me on that, because like I said, I haven't read them. I love Cordelia. She's a strong woman. She knows what she wants. She's going to fight for it. But of course, she's up against the patriarchy, as we all are. It's about family and duty and resilience and basically being a parent, and how that just changes everything for good or for bad. But because Miles is the main character of the rest of the series, that's mainly the reason that I don't want to keep going. And also the rape apology that happened in the first book is kind of continued along in this one, because it picks up from the same place. The repercussions of the actions of characters in the first one are continued in the second one, and there is some attempt by Cordelia to reconcile and rehabilitate, especially one character who was involved in the rape stuff. I don't know that I'm comfortable with it, but it is a thing that happened. That's a narrative choice that was made. I don't have to like or agree with the things that writers do in their books, and that is perfectly reasonable. And so we come to the end of another 5 books. Thank you for hanging out with me. If you have thoughts or opinions on what I have read, what I should read, please let me know. I love the comments on these videos. I love the DMs that you guys send me. And I will be back with another video about something on this channel sometime. Bye.